Hi, everybody. Welcome here. We'll just wait a few seconds while people are joining. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Um, Tomorrow, as you know, is World Refugee Day. So just about every year now, we like to offer a focused time of learning together to talk about how the members of the Food Grains Bank through their local partners around the world are serving the needs of refugees and internally displaced people, forced migrants, asylum seekers, all other individuals who have been forced to flee. Tonight, we're really happy to have guest speakers representing partnerships from Canadian Lutheran World Relief, alongside Hope and World Renew, as well as some of my own Food Grains Bank colleagues. We'll move pretty seamlessly from speaker to speaker this evening, and I'll just give a brief introduction of each person before they have a time of sharing. We'll also have some time for discussion towards the end of the call, but as questions emerge for you as we're moving through, please feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A or into the chat, and we'll have a time for discussion later on. I'm hoping to just open and ground our time of learning together with a prayer that comes from the Food Grains Bank worship resource for World Refugee Day called Welcoming a Stranger, which we'll share with you shortly. Throughout this prayer, I just invite you to feel free to pray along if you like, or, mostly I'm wanting to invite you to enjoy the images that I've collected to accompany this prayer that are from all artists who have lived experience as displaced people. All right. We remember before God all those who've been uprooted from their homes and communities, people who are forced to flee for their lives, to leave their land and culture and lives, and apart from their families. With them, we mourn their loss of dignity, community, resources, and employment. We pray especially for the women, who are the majority of those displaced. Remember the work that women do to keep families together, to nurture community, and end violence and injustice. We remember the millions of displaced children whose lives are marked by danger and exploitation. We remember before God those places where people must leave their homes because of war, injustice, and violence. We pray for those who must leave their homes in search of economic survival. We remember the gap between the rich and the poor as it gets wider, and the earth's resources who are shared by fewer people. We remember before God those who leave their homes because of earthquakes, storms, floods, and other disasters. We acknowledge the effects of the deforestation, the degradation of farmland, the loss of biodiversity and environmental destruction that happens because of conflict, and the exploitation of resources for the sake of consumers in other countries. We give thanks to you, God, for the world's diversity of peoples and cultures. We pray that hostility and indifference may give way to hospitality and justice. Help us to be vigilant stewards and faithful partners, and strengthen us to live as people of your creation, committed and bold in deeds of justice. As you're comfortable, you can pray with me together. God of all, you taught us through your Son to seek the signs of your reign in the tiny mustard seed. Plant your word deep in the soil of our hearts. Sow in us the seeds of compassion. Let your hospitality take root within us and your compassion grow in us, so righteousness may spring forth in all the world and your holy will be done. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I would like to introduce my colleague from the International Program Department, Miriam Harder.
Good evening. I want to situate our conversation today. To situate your conversation today, I wanted to give an overview of where people experiencing significant levels of hunger, at least in part due to conflict, are in our world today. This is a map from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Program for countries where people are currently experiencing acute food insecurity, with one key driver being conflict, and where the situation is expected to get worse within the next 6 months. So you'll see the hotspots of highest concern are Palestine, South Sudan, Sudan, Mali, and Haiti. The hotspots of very high concern are the Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, Yemen, and Nigeria. And the hotspots are Syria, Burkina Faso, Chad, and Somalia. This does not mean that there are no other countries experiencing acute food insecurity. Rather, these are the most significant hotspots in terms of total number of people and a percentage of the population in the emergency or catastrophe level of acute food insecurity, as is defined by the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification System. In our last fiscal year, we supported projects responding to the needs of conflict-affected people in 15 countries. Not all the countries listed here are experiencing conflict themselves, but maybe hosting refugees from other countries. We funded 41 projects through 11 members and 35 of their partners. We respond in a variety of different ways to conflict-affected people experiencing food insecurity. We provide emergency food assistance to address immediate needs through food baskets, cash or electronic money transfers, or vouchers for food vendors. Our longer-term responses with conflict-affected people may include agriculture or livelihood diversification trainings, marketing training, or supporting collective self-help groups. Not every situation is the same, so neither are the responses. But this gives you a good overview of the types of responses that the Food Grains Bank supports local partners to deliver to those in need within their own communities around the world. Providing food assistance is our most common response. And in fact, 70% of all of our food assistance programming we funded last year was with people in contexts where conflict is the primary driver of food insecurity. Food assistance, as I just mentioned, is provided in various forms, even within the same country, according to what makes most sense in that particular context for the particular partner and what is most helpful to people. So for example, in Lebanon, we support assistance via food parcels, food vouchers, and cash assistance with different partners. In-kind assistance, where actual food, which is typically purchased within the same country, is provided, is still the most common way of responding for us. This last fiscal year, this represented 55% of food assistance programming. But cash and voucher assistance is very significant and represented 45% of our food assistance programming last fiscal year. We also support acute malnutrition treatment projects with partner organizations that specialize in that kind of programming in Haiti and Somalia and Sudan. And we provide livelihood support for things such as seeds, tools, livestock, and training for people to recover and rebuild their livelihoods and lives. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Miriam. I'd like to invite Chinelo Agomeze, who is a Senior Policy Advisor at the Canadian Food Grains Bank, to speak. Over to you, Chinelo.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So I've titled my presentation Uprooted and Unfed.
Chinelo, we can't see you.
Okay. Apologies.
No
Can you see me?
worries. Yes, we see you now. Thank you.
Okay. So I've titled my presentation Uprooted and Unfed. And in this presentation, um, I'll be trying to break down the concepts around food migration, forced migration. I will try to show the linkages between conflict, forced migration, and food insecurity. And I will also point out some laws that guide food assistance. And I'll give a couple of case studies relating to hunger and displacement. But I'll start with this opening statement. The drivers of hunger and food insecurity are tied to a combination of factors: protracted conflict, economic disruptions, and climate shocks. According to the Global Report on Food Crisis 2025, conflict was the primary driver for hunger and food insecurity in 2024. And the outlook for 2025 is bleak, as you saw from Miriam's presentation. When we talk, a significant impact of conflict is movement of persons away from said context. Migration can be understood in two ways: voluntary or forced. When we talk about voluntary migration, we mean when people choose to move of their own free will or initiative. But when we talk about forced migration, we mean when people are forced to move because of natural disasters, conflicts, or climate-related issues such as flooding or drought. In situations where conflict is prevalent, forced migration is a major consequence. This means people leaving their homes, their source of livelihood, wiping out sources of income, their access to food and markets. People who are forced to flee fall in two major categories: internally displaced persons and refugees. Internally displaced persons are persons who have fled their homes but remain within their home country, whereas refugees are persons who flee from their country to another, crossing international borders. So let's look at some numbers. With the number of protracted crises at a high, there has been a steady rise in numbers of persons displaced and living as refugees. To put this in context, according to the UN Refugee Agency, as at the end of 2024, 73.5 million people were internally displaced, representing a 50% increase in the last 5 years. And the refugee population stood at 42.7 million. In 2024, 20.1 million new internal displacements were reported due to conflict or violence. And over 60% of these occurred in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Haiti, Myanmar, Sudan, and Ukraine. Hunger is a persistent danger that threatens the lives of large numbers of forcibly displaced people and influences their decisions about when and where to move. During periods of conflict, hunger may be both a cause and a consequence of forced migration. People affected by conflict experience it not only as a threat to their lives, but as an attack on their livelihoods that can undermine their ability to provide for their most basic needs, including food. Beyond conflict leading to forced migration, conflict has an impact on food systems, which have a knock-on effect on food security. When we refer to food systems, we mean all the aspects of feeding and nutrition: growing, harvesting, packaging, processing, transporting, marketing, and consuming food. It encompasses all the interactions between people and the land, water, and climate. Conflict can restrict people's movement and their access to markets, farmlands, and jobs. It also leads to the destruction of agricultural assets, such as farms, livestock, gardens, land, and as well as food stocks. Or it can disrupt markets and supply chains, especially for small-scale farmers, driving up prices and damaging livelihoods. Armed conflict remains an important cause of environmental damage, degradation, deforestation, leading to not only food insecurity, but water resource depletion and biodiversity loss. The weapons of war leave environmental legacies. They can restrict access to agricultural land, and cause pollution of the air, soil, and water sources with metals and toxic materials. Bombing and other methods of modern warfare directly harm wildlife. Additionally, as conflict displaces people, it causes people to settle in areas with limited natural resources. And so, having spoken about conflict, how it leads to forced migration, how it leads and how that has a knock-on effect on food insecurity, I would like to say that, as Miriam mentioned, it is in these contexts that we respond. A question that comes to mind is, what do international laws say about food, food security, food delivery, and conflict? Some laws that speak to these issues are as follows. International Humanitarian Law, IHL, otherwise known as laws of war. This comprises a set of laws, notable of which are the Geneva Conventions. There are also principles which underpin these laws. While there is no direct provision in IHL on the right to food, IHL complements human rights norms on the right to adequate food by setting conduct and prohibiting certain behavior that prevents lack of food, causing a population to suffer hunger, or denial of access to food in situations of armed conflict. One of the basic principles is the principle of distinction. In war, warring parties should distinguish between civilian population and combatants, and between civilian objects and military objectives. This means that in war, civilian objects such as food, crops, livestock, drinking water installation, supplies, irrigation work should be preserved. IHL also ensures humanitarian access, which is critical for food delivery. Humanitarian access concerns humanitarian actors' ability to reach populations affected by crisis, as well as the affected population's ability to access humanitarian services and assistance. Access is a precondition to humanitarian action. The responsibility for humanitarian access lies with warring parties. If they are unable to meet this obligation, they are required to allow and facilitate the provision of assistance. Food Grains Bank and our network are guided by the Code of Conduct for the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movements and non-governmental organizations in disaster relief. It's interpreted and applied in line with IHL. With this, Food Grains Bank safeguards high standards of behavior, independence, impartiality, neutrality, and effectiveness. Food Grains Bank, and by extension, its network, are members of the Humanitarian Coalition and the Humanitarian Response Network. Secondly, international human rights law. The right to food is captured in a number of international human rights laws, most especially the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which says that everyone has a right to an adequate standard of living, including adequate food. Additionally, it recognizes that steps need to be taken to ensure the fundamental right to freedom from hunger and malnutrition. Lastly, I'll talk about the Food Assistance Convention. The convention has the objectives of saving lives, reducing hunger, improving food security, and improving the nutritional status of the most vulnerable populations by addressing those needs. There are 14 signatories to this convention, including Canada. Having spoken about laws and principles, I'm going to move to some case studies, and I'll start with Sudan. Internal violence erupted in April 2023 in Sudan. And since the crisis began, 13 million people, being 1 in 3 Sudanese, have been displaced. This includes 8.6 million people within Sudan and 3.8 million refugees and refugee returnees. The conflict has led to unprecedented displacement, economic collapse, disruptions in supply chains, and destructions of markets. In Sudan, 25.6 million people are in acute food insecurity. Nearly 2/3 of the Sudanese population depend on agriculture. Conflict and mass displacement have resulted in abandoned or devastated farmland and infrastructure, significantly disrupting local food production. In July 2024, famine was found to be happening in one of the IDP camps, Zamzam camp, and has actually been found to be happening in other areas of Sudan. I'll now move to Ukraine. The current conflict in Ukraine started in 2022. Since the violence began, approximately 5.6 million have fled Ukraine and 3.7 million are internally displaced. Based on the Global Report on Food Crises, 5 million people are facing acute food insecurity. The war in Ukraine has had a significant impact on the country's economy and agricultural production and exports. In 2024, approximately 4.8 million hectares of agricultural land in Ukraine were abandoned because of active fighting, mining of agricultural fields, unexploded munitions, chemical contamination, and other problems. It will be remiss of me not to talk about challenges facing the international development sector, being the dramatic reduction of life-saving humanitarian funding, but also broad development funding to respond to these needs. In the words of the UN Secretary General, this is more than a failure of systems. It is a failure of humanity. Major donors have significantly scaled back on funding for international assistance. For instance, the US, through its dismantling of USAID, made cuts which represent 42% of global humanitarian aid. The UK has also cut aid down to 0.3% of its gross national income. This has put immense stress on an already strained system. As a result of these cuts, food assistance has been reduced or suspended entirely in certain contexts. There has also been a loss of access to vital services and loss of access to information, such as a website, which was a key resource for assessing food security needs. We are seeing and will continue to see more people being displaced and going hungry. There are other conversations around politicization of aid and conversations around aid reprioritization and the humanitarian reset. I'll conclude by leaving you with some key takeaways from this presentation. 1, conflict leads to food insecurity and drives forced migration, increasing the number of internally displaced persons and refugees. It has a knock-on effect on food systems and adversely impacts environment and biodiversity. There are laws that guide food assistance and the right to food. And lastly, the increasing politicization of aid and significant funding cuts have reduced the ability to reach populations most in need and the ability to undertake life-saving work. Thank you very much. And back to you, Megan.
Thanks so much, Chinelo. Now we're going to hear from Bori Jatta, who is the country representative for Lutheran World Federation in Haiti. Bori, we'll also need to have your video on.
Okay, yeah,
well.
thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. I hope you can see my screen.
We can see your screen, but we can't see you, Bori. Could you also open the camera?
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right, okay, that's me. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity for Haiti Country Office to present here today. It's absolutely an incredible opportunity for us, and having heard some of the points that have already been shared, it really just goes to say the exact context that we are facing here in Haiti. Now, sorry. The presentation here is going to be a short journey with you to share the Canadian Food Grain Support to Haiti Country Office in a project that is being funded here in Haiti that is restoring dignity and food security in the Grand Lands. I am Bori and I'm the presenter. So the crisis here in Haiti as we all know, it's been something that had been generational since the country had its independence in 1804, being one of the first Black countries in the world to have had that. Haiti has faced significant problems. Currently, nearly half of the population, 5.5 million people, face acute food insecurity in Haiti. And then we are operating in the Grand Anse, among other locations where this project is being implemented. And the Grand Anse is an isolated region. It's disaster affected. There is a lot of issues with the Haitian currency currently, which is stricken by inflation. And more than that, of the 5.5 million Haitian people facing food insecurity, there's also a monumental amount of displacement as a result of gang violence with Port-au-Prince, the capital city, almost completely taken over, with only 20% on the responsibility of the authority and 80% taken over by armed groups. And with that number of people being displaced, 80,000 people, IDPs, have relocated in the Grand Anse region that has been facing its own problem without having any displacement. And now these 80,000 people in the Grand Anse are hosted in communities that have always been struggling. Now, as I stated, Haiti is a wound that hasn't healed. We all remember the 2010 earthquake with more than 250,000 people dead. Following that, there's always been consistently other new crises with Hurricane Matthew in 2016, the earthquake in 2021, which is a follow-on earthquake, given that we had one in 2010 with hundreds of thousands of people internally displaced. And then the 2024 floods. And of course, the situation in Haiti remains the same with the Grand Anse, with people being really isolated, a lot of scarcity and hopelessness affecting a lot of people in the Grand Anse region. Now, this is when we had the support of the Canadian Food Grain with the Nourish Project. This is a 4-month project providing cash assistance to a lot of people who are internally displaced and now struggling to survive in the Grand Anse. About 450 households are supported by this project, with individual households of 2,250 receiving support. This is direct cash transfer of $480, and this is done through Monk Cash, which is a cash transfer system that has been set up in Haiti. And the cash is received in 3 different, in 4 different lots, giving a total of $120 per month to come to a total of 480. Now, the targeting really was looking at the criteria that's been set to capture really the most vulnerable within the community. And these are the IDPs, women-headed households, the elderly, and people living with disabilities. These are the groups that were captured by the targeting system to make sure that we really are making an impact to those that most really needed our help. Now, the aim really was to give dignity back to the population, to give dignity to people who've been affected by crisis. And we did this through digital financial inclusion. And this included, as some of you might already know, in these remote areas of Haiti, there are communities and individuals and people, particularly the vulnerable, who've been fleeing their houses once these areas have been taken over by armed groups. People left with whatever they have, whatever they are putting on. The gangs never took over and allow you to stay in the premises. When they take over, you leave. And if you don't leave, we've all heard of the name Barbecue as one of the group leaders. The houses are set on fire and people just pick whatever they can and leave. So there are people with no mobile phones. So we had to support families to make sure that there is an ability to connect and get phones and be able to receive their cash. And the process is community-led. The selection is done by the collaboration between ourselves, our implementing partner, and the communities we're working with to make sure that there is no duplication. We identify really people who are the most vulnerable. And then the response from a gender perspective, training on GBV rights, and ability to use the Moncash system. We also worked on protection and safeguarding, and the system is audited through direct feedbacks, audits to look at the way the services are going and to get feedback from the communities. Now, as I stated before, Haiti is facing really horrible escalating gender-based violence. And this, of course, with gangs taking over territories in Port-au-Prince, when they're moving, people move out. They're not there to make peace or to try and manage or control the people like in some other conflict. That makes Haiti really different. And there are so many different groups holding different territories, and that moving from one territory to another means having to cross a barricade somewhere to make sure that each gang that is controlling their group put barricades to kind of control their own territory. So this makes movement very difficult. And women and children and girls having to move these territories are very vulnerable to all sorts of violence. This has created a huge operational difficulty and put a strain on our budgets, because now instead of having to travel by road, people are having to use aircraft and UNAS helicopter to Cap-Haitien, and from there then movement to different provinces of Haiti using light aircraft. So this is really increasing a lot of budgetary constraints on our operational model here. So what had been the impact of the collaboration? I think we are incredibly grateful for the collaboration, because what this has done is just to give you a short, brief voice from Nadesh. Nadesh was living in Port-au-Prince. She had a good life with her husband and their 4 children. Everything was going very well until one day the gang came and took over the region of Kafoufe. And her husband was shot and killed. She picked up what she can and ran off with her 4 children and found herself in Grandance, where she's being hosted in a family home. And then before this, the project arrived, she was struggling with her 4 children with no support, and communities stretched to their limits. And this is what she said when we met her some 3 weeks ago during our visit to follow up on our project implementation. She said, I would skip meals to feed my children. I felt invisible. There was nobody to help or support me. But with this money, with this support that you have received, I can now buy food from the market myself. I feel that like I'm a mother again. And this is Nadesh, the single mom of 4 children. So what have we learned? We've learned through this collaboration that cash assistance increases dignity. It allows people to receive the cash and prioritize their own needs. It increases their safety and efficiency. And that we've been able to use it to improve a lot of for access to finance. Despite the limited infrastructure, people were able to really improve their own financial situation using the money. And then through our community engagement, we've been able to strengthen better community collaboration, better involvement of all community members in decision making, and to be able to better target. And then, of course, gender-focused protection work is really essential in this kind of fragile setting. These are some of the key learnings that we've had. And as I close, I think what I would really want to say to all of you is that please always remember that Haiti continues to need us, that your support is saving lives here in Haiti, and that a big thank you for your continued support. and partnership. And thank you from the families of the granddads. Thank you from Nadesh. And thank you from all of us at LWF and NSNCA Haiti for you staying and working with us and for remembering the people of Haiti. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to share our experience with you. And this is what we have from Haiti to share with you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bori. Really appreciate you joining us this evening. Jackie, thanks for being on. Jackie is the Director of Programs and Partnerships at Alongside Hope. I'll turn it over to her.
Thanks, Megan. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share the work of one of our partners this evening. In particular, the work that they're doing in Narugusha Refugee Camp in Tanzania, which is being funded through the Food Grains Bank and supported by a number of different members of the Food Grains Bank. But before I talk about the work of our partner in Tanzania, I really need to start with a little broader context. Church World Service is a US-based organization. It is one of the largest refugee resettlement agencies in the US and is working across a number of different denominations. So as you can imagine, it's been a very difficult year. In January, on the 20th, executive orders were signed banning refugee resettlement and freezing foreign aid. On the 22nd, just 2 days later, and 5 days before expected, the refugee ban went into full effect. And there were over 10,000 refugees who were expecting to travel within days. Many had already left the refugee camp and were awaiting flights that had been booked. 2 days after that, Church World Service, along with many other nonprofits in the US, received stop work orders that halted all programming and suspended all funding. Out of that, Church World Service has joined a suit with 3 other organizations to challenge the refugee ban and the funding halt that has happened. Now, that case is still ongoing, but the immediate consequences have been felt in the services that they're able to offer to refugees who have settled in the US, but also those around the world. It's an organization that have had to furlough over 2/3 of their staff, including over 500 staff in East Africa. So we're still feeling the ripples of that. While the US funding has been severely disrupted and the programming halted, work through the Food Grains Bank has been constant, including the work that Church World Service has in Narugusha Refugee Camp, which is where I want to take you now. So Narugusha Refugee Camp was established in 1996 after an estimated 150,000 Congolese refugees crossed the border into Tanzania. Many of those Congolese refugees have remained in the camp to this day, some having 3, even 4 generations in the camp. In 2015, the population was decreasing, but then civil war broke out in Burundi, and over 100,000 Burundian refugees arrived in Tanzania. Of those, 65,000 settled in Narugusha camp. And that camp, just to give a bit of context, is 40 kilometers away from the nearest city, Kasulu. And that city has a population of a little over 200,000. So you have a camp of just over 150,000 in the vicinity of a city with 200,000. So as you can imagine, this increase in population, particularly at this magnitude, has put significant strain on resources, including food resources in that region. So in 2020, we began conversations with Church World Service, looking at ways that we could support. So the project, which is focused on food security and nutrition for a 900 household, started by assessing the assets in the camp. And while refugees are limited to a small plot of land for a homestead and a garden, it is fertile land, and most years there's reliable rains. So that was a good starting point. From there, the project began conversations with community members looking at how to increase food security. The project now is in its 4th year, and it started by establishing 5 farmer field schools that included a variety of demonstration gardens, one you can see in the picture here. As families in the camp receive a basic ration from the World Food Program, the goal of the project is to complement and increase the nutrition of families by introducing new varieties of vegetables, including nightshades, amaranth, moringa. In addition to providing training on how to grow those vegetables, there's also been classes on preparation and storage. Each field school has become a community of support, and in time, seeds have been multiplied, shared with neighbors, or sold in the local market. In the current phase of the project, there is actually an increased focus on fruit trees, with papayas being a particular favorite. Another key component of this project is a focus on gender. And why gender? I mean, in short, we know that gender inequalities and gender norms can restrict women's access to resources and service. We know that the greater the gender inequality, the greater the food insecurity. And actually, in Swahili, the name of this project is Empower. And there's no better example of that than Maria's story. She's pictured here. She arrived in Aragushu as a 20-year-old with her husband and a young child. And while life was safer, they still faced numerous challenges, particularly around food. And unfortunately, like many women in her community, she struggled to find opportunities to participate in income-generating activities outside the household. And in 2024, she joined one of the farmer field schools. And initially, her husband wasn't very enthusiastic about her participation. So she found discreet ways to attend the trainings and got quiet support from fellow farmers in the field school. And through the program, Maria learned sustainable farming techniques, seed production, nutrition practices, but also communication skills to be able to engage her husband in gender discussions. So by using real life examples, she was able to show him how families benefit when men and women work together. So slowly his perspectives have begun to change. With her husband's support, they've worked together to improve their small farm. Her husband is also helping in the household, and soon other women began following her example, using their new skills to enhance their families' lives. Today, a little over a year and a half later, their farm is providing a steady income and nutritious food for their family. In Maria's words, she says, "At first, my husband was resistant, but I remained firm. Over time, he saw the benefits and changed his mind. Now we work as a team, and our farm sustains us. He has even encouraged other men to support their wives. This project has completely changed our lives." And then an emerging area in this program, particularly in this second phase, has been an increased focus on the environment. With the population of nearly 150,000, there's more than food needs here. There's also needs for fuel, construction material, and as you can imagine, this causes enormous damage to the local ecosystem. So a key aspect in phase 2 of the program has been to increase the numbers of trees planted. By focusing on fruit trees, which help households for nutrition and income, but also fast-growing trees for timber and firewood, the initiative has been really popular, exceeding targets. At the moment, the trees have a survival rate of 75%, and the new goal for the project is to have 100,000 living trees by the end of the 6-year project, so in 2027. As a result of this initiative, Church World Service is now the lead agency for the environment in the camp, and the government of Tanzania has awarded them special recognition last year for their efforts around reforestation. So their work, while significantly impacted by recent cuts, has continued in Aragushu, even increasing as we, at Alongside Hope, have been fundraising for additional services to be added to complement the work of the Food Grains Bank project. So I want to end by reading a small excerpt from a recent ecumenical declaration, a pledge issued by Church World Service in the US. In part, it reads, "Refugees and immigrant communities are increasingly the subject of misinformation, cruelty, fear-mongering, and criminalization, while government policies seek to decimate our nation's long-standing commitment to welcoming and protecting those seeking safety. Guided by our faith, we stand together against the sweeping measures that are devastating vulnerable families and jeopardizing their future. We pledge to restore and promote hospitality and welcome to those seeking refuge, regardless of where they are from, how they pray, or what language they speak. Together in faith and rooted in love, we resolve to continue in the centuries-old practice of Christian communities walking alongside refugees and immigrants in their pursuit of safety and dignity." So thank you for the opportunity to share this evening.
Thanks so much, Jackie. I'd like to introduce John Self as the project manager for World Renew's International Disaster Response Team. Welcome, John. He's going to be setting up a video, which I will diligently try to queue up while he's getting ready. Bear with me.
Thanks so much. Good evening, everyone. It's a privilege to be here with you this evening. As Megan introduced, my name is John Self. I have the privilege and honor to work alongside partners in the Middle East who are providing humanitarian assistance to many families who have been displaced within their countries or across borders as refugees. I work with World Renew, which is the humanitarian and development organization associated with the Christian Reformed Church of North America. For over a decade, World Renew has worked with a local partner named Middle East Revive and Thrive, or Marath for short. To give some context, since 2015, Marath has provided over $13 million in humanitarian food assistance programming through the support of the Canadian Food Grains Bank. That programming has reached over 216,000 people across both Syria and Lebanon. And unfortunately, while the time zone does not allow a Marath colleague to join us in person, it's my privilege to introduce Marath's program officer. Her name is Annie Bagdasarian. She has pre-recorded a message on the work that Marath is doing in the Middle East. So I will turn it over to Megan and this message.
Hello, my name is Annie, and I serve as the Food Security Program Officer at Mirath here in Beirut, Lebanon. We are a local organization supporting some of the most vulnerable families in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Sudan, through local churches and faith-based partners. Today, on World Refugee Day, we want to shed some light on the context in our region and to share about how CFGB has been helping us during this difficult time. First, what is our context? As you might know, Lebanon has faced wave after wave of crises, especially in the last few years. To cite only few, a refugee influx during the Syrian civil war, to financial crises, the Beirut explosion, and most recently the conflict between Hezbollah and IDF, which displaced 1 million individuals. A ceasefire was reached in December, but we still witness daily violations. The impact of the conflict has been devastating. Many of the families' homes or agricultural lands were destroyed or damaged. Such families not only had additional expenses, but also deprived of their livelihoods. Currently, 1.2 million people in Lebanon are food insecure, and malnutrition among children has never been higher. Let's look at Syria. After 14 years of devastating civil war, the country experienced a historic turning point with the sudden fall of the Assad regime. While this shift sparked hope for a potential recovery, it also unleashed new waves of instability. Sectarian violence has already killed hundreds and triggered further displacement inside Syria and across the border with Lebanon. All the while, the economic crisis continues. In fact, the humanitarian needs in Syria have never been higher. 16.5 million people, 2/3 of the population, are in need of aid, and over 9 million are facing food insecurity. To make things worse, the Global Cuts International funding have highly affected our region. In other words, families need support more than ever. Yet there is currently little to no assistance available to them. So how are we responding? As you can imagine, delivering aid is very challenging in this region. We face ongoing armed conflict, economic instability, curfews, road closures, sectarian fighting, as well as rising tension between refugees and host communities. Despite all these challenges and uncertainties, Mirath has been responding with multiple food aid projects, thanks to CFGB's support. These projects are implemented by local partners who understand needs on the ground and can respond rapidly. The families who benefit from the projects are among the most vulnerable in the region. Some have been displaced multiple times, have lost their livelihoods, or were affected by different disasters. These families often receive no other support and are forced to skip meals or go into debt just to survive. Through food baskets, e-cards, or vouchers, our assistance helps ease some of their burden. Improving food consumption also improves their overall well-being and gives them a sense of stability and dignity, while reducing the need for harmful coping strategies. It is worth noting that by sourcing food locally, we also support local economies. Most importantly, these projects reinforce the role of the local church as trusted, compassionate spaces where people feel seen, heard, and holistically supported. In a region where so much feels uncertain, these efforts are a lifeline and are quietly restoring hope, one household at a time. Let me share about one of these families. Fatuma and her husband fled Syria 13 years ago with their children, seeking safety in Lebanon. Their life as refugees has been increasingly difficult. Because her husband has health issues, Fatuma has to work in the field for just $5 a day. She sometimes has to bring her children with her, although they are all under 15. Recently, a bombing right next to where they live put their tent on fire while they were inside. They had to flee and didn't have time to take anything with them, not even their shoes or phone. In few minutes, they lost everything they had built in 13 years. In the aftermath, food assistance from the local church became their lifeline. The church has helped them rebuild their tent, provided the family with other essential supplies. In parallel, Fatuma's daughters were enrolled in education programs supported by Mirath, where they also received psychosocial support. Despite the trauma and the uncertainty ahead, Fatuma is deeply grateful for this holistic support during a critical time. On this World Refugee Day, we want to honor the strength of those who have been severely affected by crises. We reaffirm our commitment to walking alongside them with dignity, hope, and love. We are extremely grateful for our partnership with CFGB that allows us to continue in this essential work. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much.
Okay. I'd like to invite our presenters this evening to turn their cameras back on. We have a few questions. So maybe I'll start with just, there was a question about the way in which the Food Brains Bank and members kind of work through local implementing partners. I'm wondering, Miriam, if you could just speak a little bit to that for those who aren't super familiar with our work and how that kind of goes from Food Brains Bank out to the local communities where the work's being done.
Sure. I had shown a slide that had a list of the countries that we've worked and in the last fiscal year and the numbers of projects and then the numbers of partners and members. And I had only listed the members. So these are the Canadian organizations that form the network that is CFGB, so the 15 organizations. And these 15 organizations bring partners and their projects for funding to the Canadian Food Brains Bank. So the members are deciding who they want to partner with, where they have relationships, where they want to support. And the partners that then are receiving funding range from very grassroots, very local, small organizations to some kind of more federations or kind of national branches or national arms of INGOs. It is a range of different kinds of organizations, but certainly a lot of local organizations, organizations that are best positioned in that particular moment and with the relationship that they have with a member to respond in places. You are muted.
It's my turn. There was another question. I'm going to keep you on the hook, and maybe if others want to chime in, just about this, because there's a tone around localization, right? And about the sourcing of the food that's provided for people when actual commodity is provided. Can you say more about the sourcing of those food products and then how it ties into kind of the movement towards localization in the development field? Maybe Miriam,
sure.
and then
Yeah, quick response from me. But the selection of the modality, the way of responding is chosen by the partner as the in-country partner that is best positioned to make that decision. So if it happens to be in kind where food parcels or food products are given to people, those are purchased from commercial suppliers through a competitive tendering process within country, most typically close to where it is being distributed for competitive pricing, but also supporting local economies. But then certainly with kind of with voucher distributions, and people will be able to go and purchase in local markets or local grocery stores. So the food and purchasing happens as close as possible to where people live.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that, or can I move to the next question? Okay, good. So, Jackie, you said something that struck me, like it's not just food needs here, and that phrase kind of really just binged for me again, that these are really complex, spaces that you're talking about. One of the questions that was asking about kind of complementary services, and some of you mentioned this a little bit, but the kind of provision of mental health and psychosocial support in the midst of those programmings, if that's happening. If anyone else wants to add a little bit more about that in the program context, Jackie.
After that, I think I would answer sort of two parts to this. I think the first part is within the design of a project with the Canadian Food Grains Bank. There are going to be a lot of guidance and a lot of cues to be thinking about inclusion and how are we using tools that are there in the sector to do analysis and to do good community participation in design aspects. So in terms of sort of the CFGB component of the project, a lot of tools and guidance that can be given around inclusion, as it's a really high priority. And then I think the second part of that answer is because the 15 members of the Food Grains Bank have long-term partnerships with the organizations that are implementing the work. So the work that we do together goes beyond just the Food Grains Bank project, but includes sort of longer term partnerships with other complementary activities. So a lot of times you'll have a food security component, but then other funding that can be brought alongside to deal with the other complex needs in a community that can be really challenging and certainly impact on food security, but don't necessarily fit within the funding mandate of the Food Grains Bank. So I think it's a real benefit of having the network of long-term partnerships there is to be able to combine funding in more effective ways.
Okay. Alongside that same part of that question, I think, was wondering about inclusion of persons with disabilities. I don't know if anyone else wants to just share a little bit about the specific dynamic of that program. I think each of you talked about inclusion. If there's anything to add there, but just to honor that question, or in terms of principles that we're applying in that space.
Yeah, I mean, for Haiti, I think I saw the question which specifically saying maybe for Haiti. Yes, inclusion had been a cornerstone of our Restoring Dignity project, and we have worked very closely with colleagues there in Canada to make sure that our project design is using the relevant tools in the assessments that we were conducting on the ground to be able to be very inclusive in reaching out and really bringing in people. You know the terrain of Haiti, particularly in those difficult areas. You get people in remote locations, mobility is difficult, there are no roads. So this is why our targeting has always been deliberate and intentional to work with community members who know the people within their communities to make sure that we are able to get information and get the relevant information to inform our targeting processes. So we work with community members. We know the different community status that governmental and community level status in the Grandans. These are the people we hold meetings with. The assessment is conducted jointly with them to make sure that we get representative samples, and women intentionally targeted and included in those decision making to make sure that our response is really catching more appropriate people. And then along the same line, we work with people with disability in the same way by having community involvement at that level to be able to identify where these people are, because most of the time mobility is difficult and you can't get these people, a lot of disabled people in those areas to come out. But through our targeting tools, our community engagement processes with the status and different community status, we've been able to really capture some of these people and include them in our programming in Haiti. Thank you.
Maybe I can just add a quick reflection. I think, speaking of the Middle East context, but I think this is very much applicable in probably all of the humanitarian emergencies that we are working in as various organizations, is that persons with disabilities are some of certainly a marginalized group who are disproportionately impacted by many of these emergencies. Like Boy was sharing in terms of accessibility, maybe there are other access constraints to getting to a market or getting to a location where they might be receiving food assistance or otherwise. And so I think certainly whether persons with disability or the elderly or child-headed households or female-headed households, I mean there are so many groups that are disproportionately impacted and are more vulnerable. And so I think that's one of the key elements of these humanitarian responses is identifying, who is the most vulnerable and who are the hard to reach, and how do we you go out of our way to find those who are in great need. And I think working with Marath, for example, oftentimes they're working with households that can't come to a central location, whether because they can't afford a taxi ride or there's security concerns or there's access concerns. And so our local partners are bringing food to them, and making sure that those who are the most vulnerable are not falling through the cracks. And so I think that's a really key way that we're ensuring that assistance is reaching the most in need.
I can't speak for the vastness of the network denominationally for the Canadian Food Grains Bank, but I know that many of our member denominations are actively involved in welcoming, people coming to Canada. And we're going to see changes in I don't think quotas is the right word, but the immigration targets very shortly. And I'm wondering if any of you from your member and denominational spaces can speak to what we expect of that in terms of impact on churches and communities that are helping people to resettle in Canada. I know this is outside the space of the Food Grains Bank work directly, but we are a network of churches that live and support and advocate and pray and learn together from Canada. I'm not sure if anyone wants to speak to that from the Christian Reform or Anglican or Lutheran, broadly speaking.
Yeah, I can speak a very little bit to it from the Anglican perspective, as it's actually the Anglican parishes and dioceses that do the refugee resettlement, not us as a Hillside Hope. So I know that, just in conversation with colleagues that are providing that support, a lot of concerns about those numbers decreasing, that every year the government sets essentially numbers per sponsorship agency for how many refugees they can support coming to Canada in that year. And thankfully, and I think it speaks to the hospitality of Canadians and Canadian churches, there's more churches wanting to sponsor refugees than there are slots available each year to bring refugees to Canada. And so to see that number sort of being decreased already in recent months, but probably, as you say, more in the future, is something to be really concerned about as church-based agencies. So I know it's something that is troubling my colleagues, and in conversation with a few of the other CFGB members, I know it's something that's shared across a number of different denominations, how the sponsorship programs are already being affected, but may be more significantly impacted in the future.
This is something, I mean, it's super visible. Again, it's not central to our work necessarily as the Food Grains Bank, but because we are, have supporters and involvement of churches of every denomination across Canada. If you are interested in following and learning more about that, please visit the social media platforms of the different member denominations. A number of them are right now being really active in posting about that. So it's a parallel thing, but I'm sure many people tonight are involved or concerned about that as well. All right. Anybody else? Last words before we sign off, Chanel?
Just on this last issue, I just wanted to just kind of flag like I'm pretty sure like member houses and churches are working on this, but there's actually a bill currently before the House of Commons, Bill C2, that actually touches on issues affecting asylum seekers and migrants. And it's important for us to, I guess, educate ourselves on what the law is seeking to bring in, especially as World Refugee Day is tomorrow. I'll just like as this is outside the scope of our work, but just wanted to kind of spotlight that briefly.
Yeah, I mean, I think organizations around the world are using the next day or so to stand in solidarity and decide which forms of action and compassion they want to take. So I think this is a good time to pivot to wrap us up for this evening. But thank you, all of you, for your participation this evening. As if you're new to the Food Grains Bank Network, you know that we offer 4 calls to action: pray, give, and learn and advocate. And so we've heard a lot this evening. Oh, I have a slide to show you. I should put that back up. Can you see it now? There we go. Let's move forward to that. In terms of, I'll just speak to this one and then I'll come back to the advocacy. If you haven't heard of this already, a number of our members, as well as us at the Food Grains Bank, offer a learning and simulation experience about forced migration and food security. It's called Forced to Flee. This is available in workshop format. There's an online version as well that you can find at forcedtoflee.ca. that is informed and created out of real lived experience and stories of people in migration. It's a quick way as an individual or as a family to learn a little bit about that. Moving on to advocacy, we've heard a lot tonight about the importance of international assistance and serving people in crisis, in fragile context areas, but in general, anyone who is facing food insecurity. We have a recently launched an advocacy campaign. So we're inviting you tonight, if you felt moved by what you've heard or looking for a way to take action in solidarity with people who are who've been forcibly displaced in our world. It's important to consider that if our decision makers in Ottawa don't hear about these kind of issues, they don't hear that Canadians care about international aid or its impact on ending hunger, they might assume that people just don't care about this. So I'm inviting you to join with others and go to this link you can see online here to send an electronic postcard to the Secretary of State for International Development, just to share a message that you're proud to live in a country that plays a role in making the world a better place and does its part to end hunger, and that you support and see the importance of Canadian aid in improving livelihoods and building stronger local and global economies and contributing to a more stable and peaceful and prosperous world for everyone. So I'll encourage you to take a moment to fill that postcard out. It takes just a few seconds. A copy will be also sent to Minister of Foreign Affairs and your own MP. And it just takes a couple of seconds. So following this webinar, I saw a couple comments pop up about whether or not this video will be available. As you registered for the call, we'll be sharing with you shortly after that some links to some of the things we've shared tonight. If any of the presenters have further information that you'd like to share, you can feel free to send that to me afterwards if you'd like all the participants to receive that. If you're willing to share a copy of your presentation as well, I always get requests for those afterwards. Feel free as you're comfortable. But I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening, our speakers, especially for taking time from at the end of your day, mostly to represent the work of your partners around the world. And thank you to my colleagues, Chinelo and Miriam. Wish everybody a blessed evening. Thank you. Good night.